This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman.
This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Welcome, everybody, to episode number 102 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me is my good brother and the gentleman that runs our Twitter page. That's right, it's Liam. Liam, episode 102 is here, and we are continuing with Justice League Unlimited. Welcome to episode 102, bud.
Yeah, we're rolling right along now that we've finally joined into the JLU portion of our programs. Of course, we reviewed the pilot episode last week, Initiation, and we're rolling right along with another early episode in the first season of Justice League Unlimited with the one we've got today, which is, of course, For the Man Who Has Everything.
Yeah, this is an interesting episode because it's another one of those stories that was adapted from a comic book. So we'll talk about that in a little bit when we get into the plot, of course. Also, Liam, but you did mention, so we did get a chance to start talking about Justice League Unlimited last week with our special correspondent James from DCAU Watchtower. You can definitely go back and hear that episode in the archives at DCAUreview.com or wherever you hear your podcasts. We covered Initiation last week, which was the first episode of Justice League Unlimited, which talked about an expanded roster. We had, 50-some superheroes or 60-some superheroes or whatever it is now that the Justice League roster is expanded to. But ironically, episode number 2, we whittle it back down to the original DC Trinity, that being Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, and it sets a tone for the series. It kind of shows you, I think, that the series can kind of go in whatever direction it wants now. It can do these big, grand stories with, tons and dozens of heroes and big-time battles, and then but you still have the ability, when they wanted to go and tell these sort of smaller stories that focus on just 2 or 3 of the characters. So I like that they kind of go from a big time, potential world-ending threat one week to kind of a smaller story the next. I like that they have that flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting, and certainly something that would become a bit of a hallmark for this series, that you don't need to necessarily delve into with such a huge roster. You can whittle it down to a certain amount of these heroes, that every week doesn't need to be a all hands on deck sort of situation. So before we jump into our 4 categories today, as you always do, please give us the IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, which is For the Man Who Has Everything, which debuted on the Cartoon Network back on August the 7th, 2004, putting us coming up on the 16th year anniversary here in August.
Yes, and as you mentioned, this is for the episode For the Man Who Has Everything, which is written by J.M. DeMatteis, adapted from the Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons tale, directed by Dan Reba, with music by Christopher Carter, Michael McCuistion, and Lolita Romanis. And that synopsis reads as such. Batman and Wonder Woman find Superman immobilized in the Fortress of Solitude by a plant sent by the would-be conqueror Mongul.
So, hey, I love it. Less spoilers than the title sequence there. One thing I did want to mention, we did with last week's episode, Liam, one thing that I wanted to talk about, and we know it is something that they eventually changed, but it's something that I found interesting with the introduction to Justice League Unlimited, and we'll get into our plot here in a second. But one of the things we did not get to chat about last week is how, with the new intro that they did for Justice League Unlimited, in the middle of it, there's a lot of static imagery that they use with the models, the hand-drawn models from Bruce Timm being used with sort of motion of these static images, and then they splice in some animation in the middle of it, sort of how the new Batman Superman Adventures intro went, or even the going back to the Batman and Robin Adventures, or the Superman the animated series intro was. But the difference being that this the way that they did it for Justice League Unlimited, they at least initially would put these spoilers basically for the entire episode at the beginning of the episode, which I was reminded this week as we were watching For the Man Who Has Everything. How annoyed were you that this is still a thing?
Yeah, it's very weird because, and I don't know if part of this is just because it was like like they just didn't have a lot of episodes finished. And so, because if you watch the Superman the Animated Series intro, like all of the clips are from like the first maybe 3 episodes, because that's kind of what they had finished when it was time to make the title sequence, I guess.
Right.
And I don't know if it was simply like a cut it was like a time thing, and we're like, well, we had this idea that we're going to intercut the drawings with the sort of clips from episodes, but we don't really have any episodes done yet, so for this first season we'll just like throw in clips from the episode that it's watching, and they can kind of be edited in later in the process. I don't know. I'm guessing. I don't know that that's why, but that's really the only thing I can make sense of. But even so, they kind of, as you mentioned, especially in an episode like this, which is so driven by its narrative, most of the big moments in it are almost kind of, to your point, almost a little bit spoiled if you're watching this for the first time. They show Superman getting the plant off of him and going to fight Mongul, which is kind of like the central conflict of the episode, is Wonder Woman fighting Mongul and Batman trying to get this plant off of Superman. And so to have a lot of those beats kind of for lack of a better word, spoiled in the title sequence, I think it can be especially jarring for a first time viewer. Maybe it doesn't matter as much to us now, as we've watched these cartoons many times and are just going back to rewatch them. But yeah, for a first time viewer especially, I could see that being kind of a problem. And I'm certainly glad that they changed that for the I don't know if it's this entire first 13 episodes, or if it's just later in this. And it doesn't start until the second season there, but man, it's definitely jarring.
Yeah, and I think it would be very different if it was a 42-minute cartoon or a 44-minute cartoon, 2 episodes that will give you time to forget about those clips that you saw. But these are 21 minutes, so it's not like you have a lot of right. time to breathe, so to speak, in between the time that they show these clips and then the episode itself. But maybe they're just hoping that because this was designed for children to watch, or even if it was TVY7, that they would just be, oh wow, Superman, and then forget about what happened. So I don't know. Anyway, as you said, and as we already alluded to, now we talked about this before we went on the air. This is based on a comic book. Now, you mentioned that you had read this before we went on the air. Any differences or any main differences between the actual original comic book and the animated storytelling?
Yeah, the 2 biggest ones are that Robin, specifically the Jason Todd Robin, accompanies Batman and Wonder Woman to the fortress in the comic book adaptation, which was Superman Annual number 11, if you want to look it up. Perhaps on the DC Universe app, which is a great deal. And we'd love to be paid to shill it at some point down the line.
Absolutely. Please, DC, for anything. We're probably the only 2 people still subscribing to your service. So please just pay us to shill this.
Please. But anyway, that other than Robin's presence, the only other big difference is in the sort of, I guess for lack of a better term, dream sequence that Superman is having as this strange alien plant attaches to your body and makes you see sort of your heart's desire. And the only difference is in the episode, as we'll get into as we delve more deeply into plot, is it's really kind of a perfect world for Superman in the episode, but whereas in the book, it's the cracks are kind of showing a little bit in his dream world. His mother is dead, and his father is kind of this disgraced. Jor-El is this disgraced scientist who's kind of joined up with these political extremists, and there's a lot of political violence and anger and sort of turmoil on Krypton that's still permeating. Even though the planet didn't blow up, it's still kind of not a perfect place. And but for the most part, with the exception of those two elements, it is a very faithful adaptation, and it has to have at least been okay, because unlike, say, the live-action Watchmen movie, Alan Moore allowed his name to be featured in the credits of this cartoon. So he must have given it at least, the one thumb up.
Yeah, we could do an entire podcast about like just the sort of caricature that Alan Moore has become, and say nothing about the man has clearly written so many great stories. Huge, like just absolutely monumentally huge graphic novels that are just tent poles as far as comic books are concerned, from Watchmen, as you already mentioned, and V for Vendetta, and countless others, obviously. But yeah, he's not too much a fan of his stories being turned into movie properties, or basically redone or made money off of any these days. But clearly brilliant guy. But yeah, cool to see his name at least given credit on here, and he was okay with it. They did not stray too far from the story itself. But yeah, Liam, as you mentioned, this is a very interesting story because it has some sort of shades of the Perchance to Dream story. The episode that we covered in the archives at DCAUreview.com, by the way, where we learned when Batman basically went through and figured out what would have happened if his parents had never died.
Yeah, it's a very similar thing, and I think we even talked about that a little bit back when we did review that episode. But it's sort of that same thing. It's a little bit different, obviously, because like I said, the reason I think it works a little better in the animated adaptation here is because this really is Clark Kent, Superman's perfect world. His wife is sort of an amalgam of his two great loves, of Lana Lang, his high school sweetheart, and Lois Lane. And he's got like this great son, and he lives on a farm on Krypton. His father is still in his life, and all. It's sort of this perfect life for him. And so when he sort of begins to see the cracks, and that's sort of represented in the story by he keeps feeling these earthquakes. He really. He kind of tries to ignore it at first, and then it keeps getting worse until he finally has to make the decision. Similarly to how Bruce Wayne in Perchance to Dream has to make that decision at the end, whereas for Bruce in the end, it's sort of more of a move of defiance to break free of this dream that he's in, as he'd rather die fighting than continue to live a lie. And Superman, it's really quite it's quite sorrowful for him when he has to leave this world, because and he says that to his son, this is everything he ever wanted, but he has responsibilities and he has to go back. And it really, to me, it really works so well in this story, because it's one of those things that gets to the heart of who Superman is, of that even though he could live perfectly in this life where he doesn't have powers, where he doesn't have the weight of the world or the weight of all worlds on his shoulders, he knows in the back of his mind that it wouldn't be real, and that it wouldn't be responsible. It's what he says, I have responsibilities, I have to go. And that, to me, this episode really just gets to the core of, I think, who Superman is.
Well, and I think you're spot on with that, because there's even a line that Mongul has. So of course, we learned that Mongul is the mastermind behind all of this, who's back. Now we have not covered Warworld, which is the Justice League episode from season 1 where they have their first interaction, but there is certainly allusions to that episode here where obviously Superman sort of handed him his tail, so to speak, in that episode. But it's funny, once there's a conversation that happens between Mongul and Batman, once Batman discovers that Mongul is there waiting for them, and Mongul speculates as to what Superman's fantasy would be, and thinking that he would be ruling the world, and with peasants underneath his feet, sort of a totalitarian Superman-esque, probably a Red Sun-esque story going through his head, and the irony being that it's not anything like that. He's not a leader. He's still on a farm. It's a Kryptonian farm, wheat farm, with a girl who's a hybrid of Lois Lane and Lana Lang, with his son, and still having a conversation with his biological father, and a relationship with him, and he even talks his son in this fantasy even talks about how or I think he has a conversation about how the city is nice, but he prefers, the quiet of the farm. Yeah. So yeah, it really does get to the heart of who Superman is. Superman, regardless of whether this is his fantasy or whatever, his heart is still, he's inherently good.
Yeah. And, sort of the other conflict is the literal conflict throughout the episode, as we mentioned, Batman's trying to get the plant off of Superman, and Wonder Woman. Boy, Wonder Woman sure has a rough time of it in this episode. She is,
man.
And it's funny, we talked about, I think back when we were reviewing the very early episodes of Batman the Animated Series, how it was pretty rare to even see like a Batman land a punch without a cut, or without it being like, the guy ducks and then runs into something or something like that, or he just ties him up or whatever. And we were just seeing Mongul just beat the tar out of Wonder Woman for like a good majority of this episode.
Well, that's what happens when you move to cable and you can be TVY7, Liam. You're allowed to show violence against female superheroes and guys' face getting bashed in. We'll talk all about that in visuals in just a moment. Yes. But yeah, I concur. It's interesting that this isn't a case where they put Batman up against the wildly much stronger behemoth and allow him to use his brain to defeat him. They said, nope, we're not going to do that this time, which I appreciated. Batman had to figure out his own way to, he was left to try and free Superman, and Wonder Woman got to step up and have her own moments here, really holding her own with a person that is, twice or three times her side, can hold her waist in the palm of his hand, as he does in that first scene with Mongul, and really has a good fight scene, able to hold her own for the most part until Superman gets free. So I appreciated getting to see the warrior in Wonder Woman. I think so often in a lot of the episodes she's in, she's more of a background character. I mean, with not Starcross not included, that there was a good exhibition of her powers there, but there are some episodes where she's relegated to she's going to use her bracelets to block something, and then she'll use her lasso to throw around or give somebody a punch. But this was a brutal battle.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, it's also getting a chance to show. I think it's always can be interesting to show when you have these the top tier super powered characters like Wonder Woman, like Superman, like what do they do when the chips are down, when they're losing a fight? Do they, and seeing that she still has the resolve to keep going and to keep fighting, is it's great. And it is really interesting to see them kind of split off in that way. But there's a certain desperation to Batman in this episode that I don't think we've really seen a lot in really any of the shows, where he's really genuinely concerned that if Superman isn't freed, that like things are going to go really bad. And there's genuine fear in his voice when he tells her he's going to kill her and then he'll kill us all. You've got to be the one to come back and stop this. And so it was a really interesting dichotomy to see the the determination of Wonder Woman, and sort of the desperation and even a little bit of fear in Batman, and certainly we'll get into that more in voice acting as well. But yeah, for all the reasons and for the like we said, sort of the great character study of Superman that it is, I actually gave Plot a perfect 10 out of 10 this episode.
Nice. Yeah, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I think it's very strong as well. And it's fun to be had. My only nitpick, and this was the same, I think they did a much better job than Perchance to Dream. I think if we go back and listen to that episode, one of the issues that we had was they moved through the Bruce Wayne fantasy a little bit too quickly. He sort of accepts his reality and then quickly turns and realizes that it can't be true. This, you kind of already are dropped right in the middle of Superman accepting that this could be real. I mean, he still has a couple of doubts with the tremors, and there's clearly some doubt here, but and certainly the impact was a little bit greater when he has to leave it all behind. But man, I couldn't help but just wish, with the Justice League episodes, that 44-minute or 42-minute, whatever it is, runtime that the first and second seasons of Justice League had. Sometimes I think it handicaps or handcuffs these episodes a little bit sometimes. So I really, really would have loved to have seen this as a two-parter, a full episode, to get some of that tension built up there, but that's nitpicking, which of course we do here on this show. So
yeah.
All right, let's move on to visuals and animation. Liam, I am chomping at the bit to talk about this. Before we go, by the way, I did want to give a shout out the fact that they kept in mentions and appearances from Krypto the Superdog, who is part of Superman's fantasy, and they did mention the lost city of Kandor also in this as well. So some neat little Easter eggs there.
Yeah. There's some great stuff. I love the design, as we mentioned, this sort of hybrid planet, the Krypton, the corn, as you mentioned, the sort of the grain fields on Krypton, and even the city. It looks a little bit, I feel like there's like the big skyways like in Metropolis, and you kind of have that mixed in with the futuristic look of Krypton. Some really great work, and there's even some fun little Easter eggs, like in the Hall of Weapons where Wonder Woman is fighting Mongul. There's a Sun Eater, which is sort of this weird device from the comics that can it's what it sounds like. It basically absorbs all the energy of a sun. It's kind of this big thing that shows up to wreak havoc on certain solar systems over the years in DC Comics. So yeah, I thought first and foremost, there's a lot of fun visual stuff to talk about, but yeah, a lot of really cool backgrounds. The whole design of that and was really well done.
Yeah. So, and I mean, back on the real world also, of course, this whole fight takes place at the Fortress of Solitude, which I don't know if we've had much to talk about that from a Superman the Animated Series perspective, if we've covered any of those episodes yet, but it adds the visual. We certainly have not talked about the Lobo episode where he, the Collector, who is the main baddie for that 2-part episode, he's able to get the zoo together of all these alien creatures and create a space for them to live in the Fortress of Solitude. Those creatures make some cameos in the background as well, and then of course you have definitely some interesting visuals in the fantasy side of things. As you mentioned, we talked about Kal-El's spouse is sort of this hybrid between she has visuals that look like Lana Lang, but of course is voiced by somebody else, as we'll talk about in the voice actors. I did also notice, so I wanted to ask you, with Superman's brown jacket and his blue costume, I kind of got some Havoc from X-Men vibes from him. He has like a yellow collar that goes with a blue and a brown jacket. I I was trying to piece together what else that could be an homage to, because it seemed very purposeful to me to have that brown jacket with this bright yellow collar. I'd be interested to know if that was maybe that 90s run of Havoc, if you're familiar with from Marvel X-Men. Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured you'd appreciate that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I hadn't thought about it that much, but yeah, that's definitely that's got to be referencing something very specific. And if it's not that, that's still a great note.
Yeah, and of course you get the return of Jor-El also, and since we are back on Krypton, we have a lot of the same designs that we first saw in that Last Son of Krypton character designs, and the costumes and the uniforms that they wore with the full arm sleeves and the square sort of accents on the uniforms, the big collared capes that go down the middle of their uniforms, the sort of halo headdresses that they wear.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe James Tucker designed a lot of that stuff for Superman the Animated Series, and had sort of a directive of we want it to look alien, but it also can't look like any other Krypton that's ever been seen on TV or film before. So good luck. Good luck, kid. And that I love the look of Krypton, and it was very cool to see that brought back in this sort of fantasy sequence. And yeah, there's some really obviously we talked about it a little bit in plot. The fights in this episode are very, very emotional and vicious, as we talked about with Mongul and Wonder Woman have a really brutal fight, and Wonder Woman gets the worst of it most of the time. But even then, once the Batman takes the Black Mercy plant off of Superman and it attaches to Batman, and Superman kind of snaps awake, we get this sort of panning shot where it spins around, and then he flies at kind of full speed towards him. You see the dust flying off the ground as he's flying towards Mongul, and then they just kind of wreck the place. It's just I thought it was, as far as for what we've reviewed so far, I thought it was one of the more vicious, and you really kind of feel those punches, especially towards the end there with Superman and Mongul.
Yeah, it is a absolutely brutal fight. I would say, with just having covered Starcrossed a couple of weeks ago, the final fight between not Hawkman and Jon Stewart is a pretty vicious, violent fight, even when Shira gets involved. But this one is just fist to face. I mean, you see Mongul's face just start to swell up like a prize fighter in a fight. His face just gets bashed in, and his mouth is all sort of wonky and certainly very swollen. There's some of the other visuals that I enjoyed is, he has Superman by the head, and Superman shoots him with his heat vision, searing his chest that. Mongul cries out, and you see this flash of fire shoot across his chest, where Superman's clearly just burned this guy with his heat vision. There was another cool thing that I saw too. So once they finally get the Black Mercy off of Batman and it comes at Wonder Woman, there's this tongue that comes out of the middle of it, and they use it as a transition to the next scene. The tongue wipes across the screen, and then it flashes, and then you see Superman and back to Superman and Mongul fighting. Just a really cool visual.
Absolutely. There's that great sequence. I love maybe love's the wrong word. I think it's really compelling, the black and white sequence of Bruce, young Bruce Wayne, walking down the alley, and at first, of course, he's wrapped up in the Black Mercy plant, and so this time Thomas Wayne stops the robber and begins to beat him up, and flashes back to Batman, and he has this smile on his face, and then it sort of, as Wonder Woman begins to pull the plant off of him, you just hear Martha Wayne screaming Bruce's name, and then you hear the shots go off, and you see this smile slowly fade. It's really, really just really compelling. Again, it's one of those things where if you've read comics or been a fan of Batman for any length of time, there's probably a little bit of you, anytime you see the kid with the parents going down the alley, you kind of almost begin to roll your eyes because you've seen it so many times.
Right.
But to kind of put that little twist on it, where he sort of has this beautiful dream of what if Thomas Wayne had been quick enough to stop it all. But then sort of mid-dream, it shifts and, it turns back to reality. I thought that was really clever. And then right near the end, as we're talking about this fight, Superman's pounding on Mongul's face, and he's sort of screaming at him, about what he's lost, about what he's had to sacrifice to be Superman. And and the ceiling is kind of crumbling around him, and he looks up and he looks at these statues of Jor-El and Lara, and he sort of has his come back to earth moment, and that sort of allows Mongul to take over on him and get the advantage again. Just some really, really clever visuals, some really really impressive panning shots too, of when Superman's talking to his son, and he's kind of kneeling down and holding his son's head in his hands, and there's kind of the stop where it starts as a kind of a profile side shot and kind of spins around to where we're looking Superman kind of more directly in the face, and just some really, really well done direction, especially I wanted to mention, I believe I already said it, but Dan Reba was the director on this one, and just a phenomenal job.
Yeah, it's there, that scene itself. If you can go to YouTube and pull up the battle, if you don't, it's a 22-minute episode, so if you're going to do that, you might as well just watch the full episode. in our opinion, but certainly for the visuals of that scene alone, go find the YouTube clip, or pull up DC Universe and watch the episode there, because it's that battle sequence is done so well. Like you said, yeah, the back and forth between Mongul and Superman is just so good. Totally agree with you. By the way, this is the first time we've really seen the actual murder of Bruce's parents. There were allusions to it in Batman the Animated Series. The gun, we saw the gun go off. We saw, his parents shaking their heads or their heads down, or the alleyway turn into the gun in that one dream sequence, but we never actually saw the murder of Bruce's parents there. And that's so for us to visualize that and see that was interesting, and like you said, done really, really well. I appreciated the black and white aspect of it too. I thought that was a neat touch they did with it. The very last thing that I want to mention to visuals before, and then if you have anything else, please feel free to add, because there's so many beautiful things in this episode. Yeah. But I've been a critic of it for the last couple weeks that we've talked about the CGI vehicles that they use in they used them in Starcross, they used them last week in Initiation, but I wanted to give a shout out and kudos to the CGI version of Wonder Woman's invisible plane in this episode, because I actually think that it works super well for that, because statically a traditional animated invisible jet just looks bizarre. Yes. And I feel like they've never been able to quite get that, whether it's in the old Super Friends cartoons or, even in this era of Justice League cartoons. The invisible jet was sort of just, it just didn't work. And this appearance of this and the way they used the CGI in that opening shot, I thought was very, very effective and did a great job. Maybe that they didn't have to worry about the texture and making it blend in as much, since it's an invisible jet. It's sort of transparent, but yeah. I thought that worked really well.
Yeah, it's a cool design. You still kind of get the feeling that it's kind of Javelin-esque, but it's obviously been personalized for Wonder Woman, and you get a shot inside the cockpit, and it's kind of all lit up in green. It's a really cool. As funny as it is to say that about an invisible vehicle, it's a very cool looking. Vehicle.
Good visual for the invisible vehicle.
Yeah, and just seeing it kind of fly through the air and then go underwater and all that stuff. It's a cool visual. I agree with that. And yeah, there's to your point, there's probably a lot more to say that we're probably forgetting in the moment. But yeah, just a phenomenal job all around, I thought, in the visuals department, and that's why, in fact, I gave visuals and animation a 10. Out of 10.
Oh man, I love it. I could not disagree with you. It absolutely deserves the complete and total 10 out of 10.
There you go.
All right, perfect. All right, Liam. So far, you have given this a perfect score thus far. Interested to see what comes up as we go through here. Let's move on to music. If I can take just a second here to go on my soapbox and yell at Warner and La La Land Records, who are in charge of releasing the soundtracks for these shows. They have released everything on CD or CD only, actually, soundtracks for Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League, Mask of the Phantasm, and the Batwoman movie. And I think they did some of the other, maybe Batman Brave and the Bold as well. But they have not released Batman Beyond or Justice League Unlimited soundtracks, and that is really irritating because this episode I feel like has such a great soundtrack. I'm going to try and pump in if I can find some clips of the soundtrack itself. Thankfully, the battle scenes actually don't contain a lot of back and forth once Superman takes over. It's a lot of fists and a lot of electric guitar, but I felt like that really punctuated the scene very well. After Superman does his sort of exasperated yelling at Mongul, it's a lot of fists, and the Justice League theme is played sort of initially triumphantly, but then has this twinge of minor key to it, which creates this underlying tension. What did you think of the music?
It's great. The whole episode is really strong. As you mentioned, getting some of those twinges of the Justice League theme all rocked up. You hear the Wonder Woman theme kind of rocked up when she first goes after Mongul. Some of the soft, again, we talked about it towards the end there, as Superman's beating the tar out of Mongul and looks up at those statues, it gets very soft, and you just kind of have some soft piano music as he's looking up at the statues and then kind of remembering, remembering where he comes from and then what he's lost. And then for my money, there's two ones, and they're both in the Black Mercy fantasies. One being in Batman's, it kind of, and I don't know if it was literally the same notes, but it sounds like they completely took the Shirley Walker Batman theme and just played it in a happy high key during that sequence. And so it's weird to hear this heroic happy version or some of the similar notes, but it kind of it goes up. I play drums. I don't know musical notes, so I apologize. This is not my area of expertise. But to me, it sounded similar, but sort of when it would normally when the theme would normally zig, it kind of zagged in a happier way, which I thought was very clever to kind of represent the idea of if that great sorrow hadn't befallen Bruce Wayne, what his life would be like. I thought the music was great, and then in that sequence, which we'll talk about even more in voice acting probably, is when Superman is saying goodbye to his son, they use the same music from Last Son of Krypton Part 1, where Krypton explodes.
Oh, man.
And it's great, and it's so emotional, and it was just as emotional then. Because it not only is it emotional in this moment as you're watching Superman have to say goodbye to this perfect world, but it also harkens back to that original episode as you watched, the rocket take off and the explosions start, and and Jor-El and Lara share that last kiss as the world explodes around them. I thought that was such a clever. It was such a great idea to go back to that same theme and kind of reuse it here and recontextualize it here. And then, you have sort of your rocked up, angry fight music in there as well. So I thought it was just a great job all around. And I actually went ahead and I gave music a 10 out of 10.
Wow. I also gave it a 10 out of 10. It is, like you said, it's really good. I didn't even make that connection there. And I mean, it's stuff like that is why, we're doing this podcast because we are in love with these cartoons, obviously. Yes. That's why we've done two episodes of this program talking about cartoons. Not all that we've loved, but there's things about them that we love and things that we appreciate. And it's stuff like that where the creators of these of these episodes rather, where the creators of these cartoons have put time and effort and love into it themselves, where they would do something like that, where they would put in a musical cue. And it's not just the writers, obviously, and the directors, it's the people that are scoring it. It's the people the voice actors, they all have a love for this universe. And, to come up with an idea is, hey, let's play the same musical notes that, we're back in from 10 years before this or 8 years before this or whatever, on a completely different show, but to bring you back and kind of give you I don't know, if you're smart enough or if you are listening close enough to appreciate that and to draw a parallel there, man, that's so freaking cool.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. All right. So 10 out of 10 for both of us from that. And Liam, let's move along to voice acting here. Not a giant cast. We have some additional characters that jumped in due to Clark's Black Mercy induced fantasy. But other than that, it's a pretty tight knit cast here. As we said, it's the DC Trinity and then Mongul. And let me just allow you to introduce our characters.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, we have Mongul, who's returning after his appearance in the World episode, which we have not yet reviewed, but I'm sure we'll get to that someday. But it is the same voice actor from that episode. It is one Eric Roberts, who folks might know from a little movie called The Dark Knight.
There you go.
Or from being Julia Roberts' brother.
From the Killers Mr. Brightside video.
Right, good call. That's a deep cut.
That's one of my favorite music videos of all time. For those of you who don't know, he's the guy that's playing the lead singer Brandon Flowers of the Killers in chess. He's the gentleman that is playing him in chess there. So yeah, Eric Roberts, man, he is the ultimate slime ball. Like he plays that character incredibly well, and for him to be in this sort of mode where he's taunting both Batman and Wonder Woman, and then ultimately, even after Superman begins to kick his tail, he's very, very, very much the taunting, slimy, unapologetic villain.
So it was a gift. Teleported here from some alien culture, some grateful world, or someone wanting you to think they were grateful.
How remarkable. You animals really are almost intelligent, aren't you? That's exactly what happened.
Mongul.
You recognize me. I'm flattered. I suppose Superman told you all about our previous encounter.
You mean how he humiliated you?
A jaundiced account. What inferior specimens he surrounds himself with. I took her down before she even knew I was there. And I'll take this planet just as easily.
Yeah, he's when he's sort of mocking, he's, first of all, he would be canceled if, even if he wasn't an evil despot bent on, galaxy-wide destruction, he'd still be canceled because he is very sexist in this episode. First of all, no, but and then as you mentioned, he's taunting Superman. He's like, I think he says it must have been like tearing off your own arm, having to remove having to leave the Black Mercy's fantasy and all that stuff, and he's real great.
I fashioned a prison that you couldn't leave without sacrificing your heart's desire. It must have been like tearing off your own arm.
As you mentioned, just being kind of this slimy, taunting guy. But we have a great kind of guest cast around there, as you mentioned in the flashbacks. We have Josh Hutcherson playing Van-El, Superman's would-be son, who folks would know as he was the male lead in the Hunger Games films.
Oh, yes. He played PETA?
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, this was quite a bit before that, but yes, he was PETA in the Hunger Games, and he's been in a lot of other things, but that's probably his most famous role. I think he's it's one of those things we've talked about a few times on the show where you can kind of go either way when you're casting for a child role on a cartoon. You can cast an adult doing a kid voice, or you can actually cast a young actor. And he's very good in this episode, especially as we mentioned in that final scene as Superman says goodbye.
Yeah, question sidebar does the name have any sort of significance that you could come up with?
Nothing that I could really think of. If there is one, and we're just not getting it, feel free to tweet us or message us on Instagram.
I was kind of expecting there to be a Jonathan or a John Kent reference, because that in continuity that is pretty consistently, and certainly in present continuity that is Superman's son's name. Obviously this is 14 years ago, so
right.
Present continuity would have no sort of bearing on that. But yeah, interesting that I thought giving him Van L, I was trying to come up with some sort of connection to Superman, and I could not come up with one.
Yeah, I couldn't think of one either. But either way, Josh Hutcherson does a great job. We have Christopher McDonald reprising his role as Jor-El from the last Krypton Part 1. Yep, Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore. The villain from Flubber. His two most famous roles, I think we can all agree.
Yes, that's a deep cut. Yeah, he does. I think he does a great job. I mean, we talked about his performance on during the last Son of Krypton, which you can certainly go back and listen to in the archives at DCAUreview.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. But I think he does a great job. And it's cool that they went the extra mile there. We were talking about the music, but the fact that they went the extra mile to bring him back in continuity for a bit part that didn't have to be there, but they brought back the same voice actor.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. And funny that you mentioned, speaking of Superman's dads, Mike Farrell voices sort of the benign version of Brainiac that we see in the at the beginning of the dream sequence. Who of course plays Pa Kent in Superman the Animated Series, and in fact in Justice League as well. And funnily enough, they did a very clever little Easter egg, which is at the very end of the scene where Jor-El is talking to Superman and he's telling him he needs to let go of the past. The very last line, instead of being in Christopher McDonald's voice, it's in Mike Farrell's voice as Pa Kent.
Maybe I've just been working too hard.
The past is dead. Focus on the future.
Can we go up to the roof, Grandpa?
Somebody wants to see the macroscope.
Go on up with your father, Van.
I'll be along in a few minutes.
Let's go.
It's not right.
Get out of here. Okay.
As he tells him, like, I'll be there shortly or something like that. I did not know this until I was doing research today, the day we're recording this. So if a lot of other people may have missed this as well, but it's such a great little audio Easter egg. And because right after whatever the last words Jor-El says, Superman kind of looks back with a confused look on his face. And I just assumed it was him sort of still being conflicted, I guess, right. Every other time I'd ever watched the episode. But no, he hears suddenly Jor-El speaks in Pa Kent's voice.
Oh, man. That's so great.
Hears that. And that's the scene that directly precedes Superman going to the roof with his son. So that was a brilliant piece of whoever thought of that. I don't know if that was in the script, if that was an Andrea Romano call. I don't know who thought of that, but my God, what a brilliant idea.
Oh my gosh, definitely. It was interesting because I'm watching the credits because I wanted to check to see who did Brainiac's voice, or the Brainiac robot's voice, and to see if it was a voice modulated Corey Burton or whatever it was. And I noticed that Brainiac's voice was not on there, but then there's a credit for Pa Kent, and I'm like, well, was there a deleted scene that we missed where Pa Kent was used, and then they didn't add him till later? But that's really, really interesting. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's really, I thought was really quite brilliant. And then that just leaves us to talk about our main cast, who of course we have Kevin Conroy as Batman, who again, as we mentioned sort of in plot, is he's sort of gets to show a little bit of a different side of Batman. As we mentioned, gets to be a little desperate, a little frantic, and a smaller role, but I think Kevin Conroy does a pretty good job in this episode.
Yeah, he's fine. Like you said, he certainly, it is sort of out of his character a little bit, but you can see that as Batman, the Justice League series and Justice League Unlimited has changed the Batman character as a whole. He's certainly not the same character that he was in Batman the Animated Series, which is good because this is supposed to be some years after that. Yeah. So yes, his realization that Mongul could be the threat that, without Superman there, even though they have this entire roster of superheroes, this could be the thing that dooms planet Earth forever, is certainly a departure from the Batman character that we're familiar with, but not out of character based on what we've seen.
Yeah, agreed. And of course we have Susan Eisenberg as Wonder Woman, who, as you mentioned, she gets knocked around a lot in this episode, but I appreciated her. One, I love the scene at the beginning of the episode where she's kind of busting Batman's chops for giving Superman a terrible gift. I think that's really fun. The kind of the little, the quippiness, the sort of semi-flirtatious #WonderBat, and I like being able to hear them have kind of conversations before they spring into action, where you're sort of reminded that these characters have known each other for a while, and that they are very good friends, and she can kind of bust his chops in a way that not a lot of other characters can with Batman.
Yeah, she doesn't have a lot of speaking to do after that. It's a lot of, exclamation, and certainly a lot of, screaming and grunting, and but there is for what she does, she's strong. She's stoic in the face of Mongul, and really provides a sort of steadiness and a lack of panic. Batman's the only one that's sort of panicking. She, I think, recognizes the mission that she has at hand and realizes, or has faith, that Batman is going to prevail over this plant that's attacked Superman. So yeah, that stoicness and that sort of even keeledness sort of stands out in this episode.
Agreed. And then we have to wrap up our voice acting category, we have, of course, the man of the hour. That's George Newbern as Superman. And this, to me, Cal, is, if it's not George Newbern's best episode of Superman, it's got to be in the top tier. He's phenomenal in this episode.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we have not reviewed the last few episodes of Justice League Unlimited yet, this being only our second episode that we've covered, and I know that he has certainly some heavy lifting to do in the Cadmus story arc, but it's I struggle to think of a better performance that he's put on than this episode. Maybe Hereafter was equally as strong, or just a half tick lower, but this is really, really good. His angst, his anger, and that was something I love Tim Daly, and not to take anything away from Tim Daly, but that edge that Superman has, if he were to sort of take the gloves off, so to speak, I think George Newbern does a great job of that balance. And the times in the Justice League Unlimited where he's able to sort of to show that not vengeful, but that more aggressive side, the angry side. Certainly the episode with him and Darkseid from Justice League, those episodes, him being able to show that range of emotion is really good. And this is another one of those episodes where he gets to do that.
Yeah, and it's such a wide range of emotions too. You talk about the rage he has towards Mongul that we see at the end. It's fun, and you hear how happy he is. When he's living kind of his perfect life, and he's got this wonderful family, and he's enjoying himself, and all the way through to everything in that scene with him and his son on the roof is really perfect.
That's it. Fight it, Clark. Fight it. Fight it.
Dad! Dad! You've got to look at the... What's the matter? Why are you...
Van, when you were born, it was the happiest day of my life. When I first saw your beautiful little face, your tiny fingers squeezed my hand so tight, like you never wanted to let go. I've watched every step, every struggle. But Van, Rao, help me. But I don't think you're real. I don't think any of this is real.
Don't say that, Daddy. Please, you're scaring me.
No, I don't want to scare you, Van. You are everything I ever wanted in a son. This is everything I ever wanted in a life. But I've got responsibilities, Van. And I have to go now. I promise you, I'll never forget.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the emotion, and again, that goes back to visuals and then music as well. As it all kind of comes together in this kind of perfect moment. But as he holds his son as the world is blowing up and promises that he'll never forget, it's incredibly emotional, and it's again, I don't think we generally, and obviously we don't need to harp on that side of Superman too often, because he is such a positive, hopeful character, and I don't think you need to portray him as mopey or sad about what he's lost. He's kind of the eternal optimist character, and I appreciate that. But to see him sort of have this moment because of this sort of jarring experience, to kind of just be himself, to be reminded of, he lost his entire world before he was ever born. And he's spent his entire life wishing that he could have gotten to know his parents, wishing that he could have had this perfect life, that he could go and retire on a farm somewhere and just, be with the love of his life and have a kid and raise a family, and having to give all that up, as we talked about, to go back and take the weight of the world back onto his shoulders it's really something special, and George Newbern without a question, I think, rises to the occasion here as he gives a great performance.
Yeah, I think as I'm sitting here listening to you describe that, I think what that is, and it's not an aspect that we, I think, are able to identify just because Superman is so good. But that's, the famous saying about Superman is what? He's fighting for truth, justice in the American way. Well, that's the justice aspect of that. And that's when somebody has been wronged, when somebody has been, wronged in a way that is unjust. He's going to stand up for them. That's what he stands for. So for him to stand up for himself in that way, because he was treated unjustly, this was something that was robbed from him, and then in this case, somebody tried to take advantage of that, or to sort of to exploit that aspect of his life, or the life that he never had. That's the justice aspect of that. So we don't get to see it very often, because usually in that way, I think we get to see it with him punching things, or saving people from things. But for him to actually be able to administer justice in that way is sort of rare, I think, in these episodes, and for George Newbern to be able to convey that emotion of enacting justice is certainly a testament to his ability, his understanding of this character and the Superman, and certainly fits right in with the Superman character itself.
Absolutely. And for all of those reasons, my voice score is a 10 out of 10.
Wow, perfect score for that. I would be remiss. I think we left one person out on this voice casting list, and that would be Dana Delaney. Delaney.
Playing the hybrid of, I believe in the credits, she's referred to as Loanna.
Yes.
Which is quite on the nose, but yes, she visually, as you mentioned, looks very much like Lana Lang from Superman the Animated Series, and yet she very much speaks in the voice of and has the personality of Lois Lane from Superman the Animated Series, and it's always great to hear Dana Delaney get to come back.
Absolutely. The fact that they brought her, again, another just nice little touch by Andrea Romano to bring somebody in. Could have used anybody's voice for that character, but of course bringing in Dana Delaney, who's probably on the Mount Rushmore of our Mount Rushmore probably has like 10 different people on it as opposed to 4, but she's definitely in the top 10 as far as DCAU actors and actresses go. So for that reason, I also gave voice acting a perfect 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah. All right, Liam. So I guess it's time to total things up here. So totaling up my score with everything included here, I give a final score of 39 out of 40. What about you?
And I, totaling everything up, have given this episode a perfect 40 out of 40.
Oh, man, love it. We are 2 episodes into Justice League Unlimited, and we already have a top pick and a perfect episode from Justice League Unlimited. Man, well deserving.
Yeah, and this is, I think for me, this is what we call an immaculately perfect episode.
Yep.
We've only
had one of those before?
Yeah, I believe it was you giving it to Jokerfish, perhaps? I'd have to look at that, but yeah, most of the time our perfect scores have been with the help of a bonus point or 2. But either way, it's a rare feat to get a perfect score, and an even rarer feat still to have a perfect score with just our 4 main categories represented. So yeah, I don't even think we need to. We barely need to touch on rewatchability. Yeah, this is great. This is one of the best of any DCAU show.
Wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah, it's fun. It's not it's not a long watch. You get a showcase of some of the best acting, voice acting, some of the best animation. You have your core characters that you know and love with Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. So you get the whole trinity there. You get a great slimy villain that you just want to see get his butt handed to him, and justice is served in the end. And you get a little bit of insight into Superman as a character, and his heart, and as you said, a look at no matter where Superman is, or whether it's in his dreams or whether it's in reality, that Superman is just this inherently good guy. So yeah, it's fun. Watch this one, watch it twice, watch it 3 times. You probably won't get sick of it, and definitely wholeheartedly agree. Plus the Easter eggs just add a little bit of little bit of meat to the bone.
Yeah, much like we found out today. The more you watch this episode, the more things you'll find to like about it. So definitely a thumbs up for rewatchability.
Absolutely. All right, Liam, so that will be time to wrap things up then. Thank you, everybody, as we always say, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, whether that is Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or some of those ancillary ones as well. If you get a second and you have time, please leave us a review on our iTunes or Apple Podcasts or whatever it's called now. It takes a couple minutes to get logged in there to do that, but it helps us out immensely. Don't forget also, Liam runs our Twitter. He's on there talking about, he's given previews for the next couple episodes that we're going to be discussing. Liam, what are we going to be talking about on next week's episode?
Yeah, so we're wrapping up this exciting month of April with one last episode of Justice League Unlimited. And much like with the other Justice League series and with Superman, we won't be going in direct order episode to episode. So we're actually going to jump forward a couple episodes and review the episode which is entitled The Greatest Story Never Told, a Booster Gold themed episode. So
yeah, we alluded that to a little bit last week on last week's episode, so it'll be interesting to take a look at that one. That's another one that has not been in the rotation too much from my recollection, so be good to get a refresher on that one. Also, don't forget to check us out on Instagram. We'll be posting clips from upcoming episodes on there. We also have stuff that we post on there weekly, daily almost. We do our Flashback Fridays. Also, don't forget to check out, we have some stickers up for sale now. You can either message us on Instagram or Twitter for that. Just a couple of insider sort of Easter eggs of our own. We have our own Dana Deserves Better sticker that's come out. Yeah, I mean, she really, really does. You can get your hands on one of those. You get the podcast logo. We also have our complete DCAU homage as well on there. So you can definitely check that out. Yeah, I think that wraps things up, Liam. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that'll about wrap us up. Looking forward to one last Justice League Unlimited review next week, and then looking forward from there.
Absolutely. Well, until next week, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.